create all beings, I shall always look for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I enter the mind and stand on the way. Lord, I enter for all sentient beings, as long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until the day my truth remains, to dispel the mysteries of the world.
Okay, let us do one rosary of non-benevolence, during which you think with compassion, imagine, develop the wish to remove the suffering of all others. Om Mani Padme Hum. So, we have been discussing beyond religion, ethics for a whole world by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And so this ethics is the way in which we behave. And ethics cannot just be a sort of concept. Ethics must be applied in our lives in order for it to be meaningful. We must adopt an ethical view. We must develop and apply ethics to our inner values. And this we do, and this we'll find this on, I think it's page 107. The technique for bringing ethics into our, let's say we start with the premise that we're all sort of self-centered beings going about our lives. And the work that we're trying to do in cultivating ethics, in applying ethics, is going from the sort of natural self-centered way that we engage in life or with life to developing some kind of a concern towards others, for others. And the three qualities that His Holiness is introducing are heedfulness, mindfulness, and awareness. Now, we'll go into those. These are rather interesting because I feel that there's a lot of overlap between these, and you have to, and though that can be, we can view that as sort of like there's something wrong with that, but actually, if we take these three aspects of practice on and try to disentangle them, the mere thought, the mere consideration of what each of these means will help inspire us and will help develop these qualities in us. When our mind goes to something, when we actually think about something, whatever the something is that we are considering affects us. If we permit our minds to get frustrated and then develop anger, the mind will affect us totally. We will become angry. If we desire something, we see it in a shop, and we indulge that desire, that has affected us. Our whole mental and even, I won't say physical in the sense that it doesn't affect my flesh, but it affects my being if I get angry. It affects my being if I develop attachment for something. It affects my whole composure and thought process, and my calm is upset by these things. And so our thoughts are particularly important. So as we consider, as we sort of disentangle heedfulness, mindfulness, and awareness, we are actually bringing these qualities into ourselves. The thought itself has that effect on us. So my notes here. So we engage in an ethic of restraint. So His Holiness talked about an ethic of restraint, deliberately restraining from doing actual or potential harm to others. That's one ethic that we engage in, that we've discussed over the last couple of weeks. An ethic of virtue, where we actively cultivate at enhancing a positive behavior and developing a positive inner attitude. And then there's the ethic of altruism, where it's not just a question of restraint and developing positivity within us, it's actually devoting ourselves to benefiting others. Those are the three levels of ethics that His Holiness presents. And when we are working at developing that third one, the ethic of altruism, we have to really work on the mind. We have to transform from a natural tendency towards self-preoccupation to consideration for others. So, and in order to do that, His Holiness is proposing these three techniques, tools by which we work on the mind. So, and he says, just as a carpenter would not think of mending a chair without having a chisel, hammer, and saw near at hand, so too do we require a basic toolkit to help us in our daily effort to live ethically. In the Buddhist tradition, this toolkit is described in terms of three interrelated factors known as heedfulness, mindfulness, and introspective awareness. These three ideas may also be useful in a secular context. Together, they can help us retain our core values in everyday life and guide our day-to-day behavior so that it becomes more in tune with the aim of bringing benefit to self and others. So, heedfulness seems to be a quality of developing caution. Heedfulness is being careful of our behavior as we engage in life, and particular our thought patterns. Mindfulness is to recollect what we are aiming towards doing, remaining mindful of our minds, but recollecting what we're trying to accomplish. And awareness is developing a broader conscientiousness regarding the way we're leading our lives, what we are doing. So it's sort of like paying attention to our behavior. So the first of these is heedfulness. This caution refers to adopting an overall sense of caution. The Tibetan term Bakyu, often translated as heedfulness or conscientiousness, carries the sense of being careful and attentive. For example, if we're diagnosed with having diabetes, the doctor will advise us to be very careful with our diet. We must avoid sugar, salt, fatty foods to keep our blood pressure and insulin in check. The doctor will warn us that if we fail to adhere to this dietary regime, there may be serious consequences for our health. So it's developing that same quality towards the way we behave in life. I had a godfather who was a diabetic, and his attitude was, I will give myself insulin and I will have as much sugar as I want to. The job of the doctor is to enable me to lead my life the way I want to lead. That's not the way we go about our practice. We should work towards developing the kind of care over our thoughts and our habits that where we are assuming our own responsibility. So, I'll go to the end of this part and then we'll discuss heedfulness. In one classic Buddhist text, heedfulness is illustrated with a story about a man convicted of a crime who is ordered by the king to carry a bowl of sesame oil full to the brim, while a guard walks next to him carrying an unsheathed sword. The convict is warned that if he so much as spills a single drop of oil, he will be struck down with the sword. You can imagine how careful and vigilant the convict would be. He would have complete presence of mind and total attentiveness. The story illustrates how closely related heedfulness is to the qualities of mindfulness and awareness described below. So that little story of the convict and the oil, I remember it's one of those Lamrim stories that we have heard over years, and it has really marked me. I've always thought, I don't think I'd be able to do it. No. I think I would drop some oil. And it's concerned me. I think of, really, it has bothered me that that's a very tough, but that vigilance, even the fact that I think about it and say, gosh, I'm not sure I could do it, that's not a bad thing. It means that I'm thinking about it. And that vigilance is what we should bring to the way we lead our lives. So, any comments? You lead your life as if you're carrying a big bowl of oil up to the brim on your head? That might be easier. When they build in the south of India, the women carry the bricks. They have these metal bowls like this, and bricks are stacked within it. There are 9 bricks. And then these 2 guys help the woman put them on their heads, and then they carry them absolutely straight to the place. And I watched this as we were building the new building in the monastery, and I thought, I'd like to see what this is like. And so I asked if I could. And they placed one of these on my head, and I whoa. And it's heavy, and you wobble underneath it. And I remember the women from around where we are very skinny. And I said to one of our monks, "Look, they're so skinny. It's amazing that they can carry these heavy loads." And he said, "They're like iron." Like iron. So whenever I see these, but the thing is that they're like iron because they have to be like iron. They don't really have so much of a choice, and they just work carrying these loads. Well, I carried maybe 2 loads, and had the liberty to stop, which is a great luxury they didn't have. So, any comments on heedfulness? So, when we are working at transforming our minds, remember that the aim, the goal is to bring an attentiveness to the way we live so that we can begin to change the emphasis from self-preoccupation to preoccupation with others. So today there are many secularized techniques for the development of mindfulness. Yes, mindfulness has become a generic term. These have been shown to be effective in stress reduction and the treatment of depression. As I understand it, mindfulness in this context usually refers to gaining awareness of our own patterns of behavior, including thoughts and feelings, and learning to let go of those habits, thoughts, and emotions which are unhelpful. This seems a very worthy endeavor. How we might go about further developing this kind of awareness is a subject which I will go into chapter 9. Yet in the context of living ethically on a day-to-day basis, in my view, the most important meaning of mindfulness is recollection. It's interesting, we think of mindfulness in terms of just being aware of. And he's only to say it's recollection. In other words, mindfulness is the ability to gather oneself mentally and thereby recall one's core values and motivations. So it's not recollections of something, it's recollections of the qualities that we wish to bring into our lives. So what I find very interesting about this technique for developing a concern for others is that it's all this very careful training of the mind. It's this very careful assumption of control over the mind, remembrance of what it is that we wish the mind to do, that is to be concerned with others, and then the application of the techniques to bring that about. So it's this, it's not an arbitrary, it's not simply calming the mind down and expecting that it will naturally be concerned with others. On the contrary, it's really developing a tight grasp of the mind. What do you think of that?
I agree.
Do you now?
Yeah, I do.
Yes.
His Holiness once long time ago, gave an explanation of depression, just a very brief one. And he said, an inability to posit the conventional I. And people were just kind of like, and that was the end of it.
And so what does that mean?
Well, if you don't have a grip,
To posit the conventional...
inability to
I got
posit
it.
the conventional I.
So to posit the conventional I, that which they are unable to do, what is that?
I'm not familiar with depression.
What is the I that you said are not
The
familiar?
conventional.
Sorry?
Conventional. What is it you're grasping?
You're asking me?
Yes.
What does the conventional I?
Gather oneself mentally and thereby recall one's core values and motivation.
Yeah.
Any connection with the
Conventional I? Well, I don't really know. We were depending on you who brought this up to explain what the conventional I
It was
might
as
be.
holy as it. I just translated it, but I didn't understand necessarily any better.
So we all
But it
grasp
remains-
at some kind of non-existent I.
Yes,
We are made up of a bunch of parts,
yes.
and the mere I that is that depends upon the parts that make us up might be that conventional I.
That might.
The ultimate quality of it is that there is no actual intrinsically existent I,
No.
but there is the mere I. There is, I'm here talking to you, and you, each one of you is an individual person seated here with a sense of self. It's a wrong sense of self, in that you are holding on to some independent quality of me. And because of that, holding on to that independent sense of me, we consider ourselves to be the center of the universe. We behave from a point of view of me and them, or me and you all, and we engage in actions that then cultivate this attitude and cause us to engage in non-virtuous actions that cause us afflictions, and here we are.
We don't want to drift off of that point that we have a sense of who we are. We're being told to concentrate on the technique. We don't want to hear that. We want our ego to express itself as it's a block, and we have to get ready to really do the work. It's not glamorous, at least in my case. It's no work, as far as I see it. I'm breezing along, yes, that's it. And we have these ideas what it might be like, but the constant bringing back to the technique, bringing it back, I see it as the current thing that I'm doing. I don't know.
So these techniques, these things, as Tony has said, are things that we have to work at doing. Heedfulness, mindfulness has to be applied all the time. It's not just when we have been caught red-handed and are led around with a big pot of oil. We have to do this all the time. I think a few jokes are permitted.
We need occasionally. That's cool. You say it every time. We have to work. He uses the word work. And that's what it is. Unfortunately, we're not getting paid, but we're
Well,
getting
we
paid.
do get paid
Oh, yes.
with happiness as a result.
The universal currency.
Are these three maybe comparable to the three trainings?
Ethics, wisdom,
Ethics, concentration, and wisdom?
No.
I might debate that.
What's up?
So, where have we gotten? So mindfulness. So mindfulness is the ability to gather oneself mentally and thereby recall one's core values and motivations. In Tibetan, the word for mindfulness, Trempa, also means memory. So it suggests bringing the presence of mind into everyday activities. With such recollection, we are less likely to indulge our bad habits and more likely to refrain from harmful deeds. Littering, being wasteful, overindulging oneself are all simple examples of behavior which can be improved through the application of mindfulness. It's tough, overindulging. Littering is not so difficult, but overindulging, being wasteful, and these little applications of mindfulness, it's not that we are going to, I think that we engage in diminishing wastefulness in the belief that we are going to be able to contribute to the needs of the planet Earth. I don't think we're going to make a great dent in the situation. However, it's the greatest contribution we can make. And in that sense, it's wonderful. And we should keep on trying. Yes? Awareness, sheshin, in Tibetan, means paying attention to our own behavior. It means honestly observing our behavior as it is going on, and thereby bringing it under control. By being aware of our words and actions, we guard ourselves against doing and saying things we will later regret. So sheshin is that, I think that we often think of mindfulness as being that, this is where I feel there's overlap between the way we use the word mindful and the way what is being suggested here. This awareness has a quality of mindful. When we are angry, for instance, and we fail to recognize that our anger is distorting our perception, we may say things we do not mean. So having the ability to monitor ourselves, having, as it were, a second order level of attention is of great practical use in everyday life, as it gives us greater control over our negative behavior and enables us to remain true to our deeper motives and convictions. Well, that's a little sentence to mull. I think that having the ability to monitor ourselves and having, as it were, a second level, level of attention is of great practical use in everyday life. Truly, that's something to think about each day. Because it's one thing to be mindful. It's another thing to remember that we wish to be mindful. And in order to be mindful, we have to actually sort of like draw the reins and develop the awareness that keeps us mindful. We have to do that. We can't just expect it to kick in. And so, like so many of the things that we've been discussing here, when we set our motivation for the day in the morning, if we think, I've got to maintain mindfulness, it's really important that I remain in control of my thought patterns, because that's the only way that I'll avoid getting angry, avoid indulging in attachments, etc. So that what would you call it? Engaging in mindfulness with an awareness is important. Such awareness of our own behavior, our actions, thoughts, and words is not something we can learn overnight. Rather, it develops gradually as we become more aware. We slowly gain mastery.
See, John Donne is using the expression meta-awareness for Shishin. He's translating Shishin by meta-awareness.
I don't know the word meta. It's an English word?
Meta?
Or it's Swiss. I suppose it's Swiss.
It's
You're
Greek.
Swiss?
It's Greek.
I met her last week.
Meta.
I met her last week.
It's a Greek, you know.
Oh, but we speak in English.
Television,
Oh.
what's tele?
He said second
It's-
order of awareness.
It's either Greek or Latin.
Second order of awareness, he's called it. So in other words,
Metaphysics,
Yeah.
higher level of
I think the hint is that
beyond.
that takes habit pattern to work on. The hint here is that it's a habit to develop, which you don't develop a habit.
It's a higher level. You're looking at yourself from,
Right, and
am I being mindful or not? Am I angry or not? I think is what he means,
Or introspection.
as in metaphysics.
Metaphysics.
Metamorphosis.
it's the 5% of the mind watching what the main mind is doing.
Yeah, that famous little bit.
The corner of the mind.
Yes, the corner of the mind that I've never found.
Couple of espresso sitting there, you watch. That's how we do it, yes.
So,
It's fixing your intent is a real good place to start. Is with intention.
Fixing
your intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your natural intent.
and reflection. People.
So, all of these techniques are analytical meditations. They're all forms of training the mind analytically, which affects the way we then. So meta means above,
Beyond,
beyond,
usually.
like meta, parameta.
I think that's more like Sanskrit. Before the Greeks. Maybe that's where the Greeks got it.
So to some readers, this mental toolkit may sound very like the advice to listen to your conscience. So here, conscience, His Holiness is bringing the idea of conscience in as, a conscience is well, as he says, it's not something that we talk about in Buddhism. There is no thing, this conscience, which might be an aspect of, a holy aspect of us, our soul or something like that. So an idea which plays an important role in many religious approaches to the practice of ethics. And indeed, there are many similarities between the two. In some religions, conscience is regarded as a precious gift from God, which makes human beings uniquely moral creatures. From a secular perspective, we may understand conscience as a product of our biological nature as social animals, or as something we acquire from society through our upbringing and environment. In other words, if we're looking at this whole idea of conscience from a secular point of view, if we feel that it has to arise from some natural, the survival of the fittest, then conscience must be some quality that helps us survive. And therefore it would biologically have evolved, right? So the secular attitude is quite different, and is interesting. Either way, all sane and responsible people will surely agree that this quality is of great significance with respect to our moral sensibility. Whatever one's views about religion, the idea of a person devoid of conscience, without any inner voice of restraint or moral responsibility, is truly frightening. Practicing awareness is not quite the same as listening to your conscience. However, and in Buddhist ethical theory, there is no idea of the conscience as a distinct mental faculty, but being conscientious is still very important. It is described in terms of two key mental qualities, namely self-respect and consideration of others. So, okay. Well, do you have any comments as we progress? The first of these, self-respect, relates to having a sense of personal integrity, a self-image as a person who upholds certain values. So, as a monk, we wear robes, and the robes serve two purposes. They serve the purpose of reminding me that I'm a monk, and they serve the purpose of reminding you that I'm a monk. And both of these things help me maintain my awareness of being a monk, and the conscientiousness that I have to maintain to be a monk. And I feel that there's a relation to this self-respect and consideration of others, so that this quality of, here we're talking about maintaining this awareness, we do it from these two different points of view. So when we are tempted to indulge in harmful behavior, our self-image acts as a restraint, as we think this is unbecoming of me. The second mental quality, consideration of others, pertains to having a healthy regard for others' opinion, especially for their potential disapproval. Together, these two factors give us an added level of caution about doing wrong, which can strengthen our moral compass. So, this is a lot of all these points are providing us with this, it's sort of like a corset that holds us together as we go through life. It's like a moral corset.
It's funny because he's celebrating restraint and not looking at it as a drudge, or let's make it easy, let's do that. There's a factor there where you have to just restrain yourself if you want to improve, so far.
But this is called maintaining good ethics, right? Is it?
These are the prerequisites to being able to engage in that ethical behavior that is of benefit to others. So this is the restraint, the maintenance of a correct perspective, a memory of what it is that we are aiming towards, all of which hold us together not for no reason, but specifically so that we can engage in the ethical behavior of benefiting others. The ethics of restraint, the ethics of, and finally the ethics of virtue.
But we wouldn't want to maintain this tension.
We would not want to maintain these things with tension. I think that a certain amount of tension is necessary to maintain these things. I think if we are lax about them, the whole point is to develop, the muscle of restraint. And in order to develop it, you do it by a little bit of tension. If we let, you're a musician, if you don't practice, if you don't push yourself to practice, you can't create music, right?
It's a balance though. If you push too much, then you tax yourself. And then you might get fed up with your discipline.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet. You're rushing to the ice cream. Yes, it's true. And when we read the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, there is a point where it is important that we relax. But it's not that we relax forever. It's that we relax with the motivation of being able to then have the calm that enables us to continue.
I would think also the more we do it, the more we feel the benefits of it, and that becomes easier and easier.
Of which?
The more we restrain ourselves from the negative actions or harming others, we can start to feel the benefits of that, and that's something that's very easy to continue.
I think that's long. We have a long ways to go. I have a long ways to go before I can just feel that I can relax about doing good and feel good about it. I think that here, well, what do you think?
Doesn't it take more attention to understanding what compassion is before you can be compassionate to someone else? You must seek it in yourself, along with with ethics and morals. It comes along as a side effect. That kind of intent comes as a side effect of nurturing peaceful, loving kindness from the heart. All these things happen naturally when that's developed.
Well, when they talk about cultivating compassion, for example, as we have said, compassion, the wish to remove the suffering of others. The first thing that one has to do for it to come about is recognize our state of suffering. To really know what it is that we're working towards being compassionate towards, which is the suffering of others. But we only recognize true suffering in a real way if we recognize what suffering is in ourselves.
But after you develop that, it's quite easy to see it in the person sitting next to you.
So the other thing they talk about is really working at or acknowledging, recognizing how dependent we are on all others. And it is out with those two that we then really feel others. Not just a certain
But
empathy.
I'm more prone to being attentive and mindful of others after I've looked in myself first. And once I've seen it there, then it's very easy to go without, to do it on the outside. But I don't think that people that are not brought up with understanding of that concept can find it, they find it very difficult to act morally. I mean, there are all kinds of things going on all over all the time where people have good intentions and then they just cheat their way through life, and in the wake of their activity, they're harming people left and right all the time. So it might be incumbent on us to look first to ourselves to find it, and then we can give it.
When you say it, here you're talking about compassion?
I'm talking about compassion, I'm talking about ethics, I'm talking about morality. You can't, I don't believe you can truly love another person until you've learned to love yourself. So it's a matter of cultivating, and this is just my ideas, cultivating in the self, and then everything else follows and will fall in line. It's not a matter of trying, it happens automatically.
So here His Holiness is suggesting that we do need to put a certain amount of effort. We have to do a little trying.
But this is like on an intellectual level.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm just like a little bit confused because it does sound more on an intellectual level in this book than anything else that I've ever heard him say or do throughout. You know, so it's interesting how, I mean, everybody in this room came from a different moral background, came from a different ethical background, came from a different everything background. And we have certain things in common, but we can't, I don't think we can actually have ethics unless we understand what they are. And you can't understand what they are without searching first in the heart what they are, and then let it go up to your brain if it can get there, you know.
So here we're being introduced to a reverse process, which is that acting unethically really brings us and the world around us great unhappiness. And therefore, we, as we work towards developing ethics, work towards developing a certain control over the natural tendency to be selfish and recognize that that brings us unhappiness, and develop the restraint that enables us to think and thereby behave in a more selfless way. So it's a mental, and that doesn't come out of a natural, virtuous feeling. It comes out of the work that will bring about that natural feeling. Is what's being. That's what. Is that?
That makes sense. There's a beginning stage.
I didn't hear what he said.
There's a rote learning
We do have to.
component of this training.
I mean, that's what's being introduced here. So, you know, the whole notion we have. I'm responding to what your suggestion that compassion is something that we first have to have towards ourselves in order to have towards others.
I think so. Just, it's been my experience.
So, our definition of compassion is the wish to remove the suffering of others. So that wish to remove the suffering of others, the wish to remove my own suffering, should, in the sort of Buddhist scheme of things, lead us to seek freedom from suffering, which is nirvana, or a state of freedom from my suffering. Yes, that is an important. That we don't call that suffering. Sorry, we don't call that compassion.
No.
We call that renunciation. Yes. So that's important. We have to first have renunciation. Then we have to work towards recognizing that others are suffering the way we are.
Right, but how do one expect someone to have that information if they, I mean, where does it come from? Where does a sense of ethics, how do you instill that in a kid that doesn't understand about ethics? How would you instill an intellectual concept of what ethics is, right and wrong? How do you, where does that come from if it does not come from?
Well, you want to have the child recognize that he or she experiences unhappiness as a result of that full indulgence in selfishness. And you can see that I've not been a parent because I'm saying these things. So would the mothers and fathers here contribute to?
Well, I'm asking the question because it's an ongoing question. It's like, how do you instill something on an intellectual level to someone that has no concept of what it is, unless.
My daughter likes to hit and kick my wife now.
I'm sorry, she what?
She's 3. She's
Oh, yeah.
3.
What is I didn't know.
His daughter is 3 years old,
Yeah.
and she likes to hit and kick his mother, her mother.
Yeah. And so so part of the script goes, how do you think that makes me feel? How do you think I feel when you do that? And unfortunately, this doesn't come from His Holiness. This comes from Instagram parenting teachers, who are probably getting it second, third, and fifth hand ultimately from Buddhist theory, really. But yeah, she's doing pretty good with it. Like she starts, sometimes she gets all the right answers and it's, oh, that makes you feel sad, and then I think the follow up is like, well, what can you do to make me feel better? Maybe that's not exactly how it's worded, because we're not trying to put on her like, what can you do for me now? It's not supposed to obviously come off as that, but somehow like, how can you emotionally help balance the situation?
I can tell you. I've been the nanny for 50 years.
There you go.
I can tell you.
So you know better than
I'll
I
tell
do.
you later.
Okay. But I think the instilling the premise to her, just the premise of do unto others, where she's just now kind of probably starting to understand, like, that she doesn't like being hit, so whether it's her mom or her friends, that she's starting to kind of understand that it feels the same way to them.
Well, you're running the train?
Well, yeah, to be honest, I'm actually not going to the train, but I have to do something for my wife. I have to get a car on the Upper East Side. So I don't want to be too late, but yeah, ordinarily I would be running the train.
So here, what we're really working towards, so do go,
Thank
you
you.
have to go. And thank you for that. That was here, we're not really, I mean, it's interesting to talk about how you raise children, but here, the child that we're working towards raising is ourselves. And we're working towards how to deal with our own kicking and screaming when we don't get our way. Our own, all the techniques that we apply to get our way. And the sort of mental exercises that we do need to engage in. And yes, recognizing the happiness of when we do things in a nice way, recognizing the virtuous aspect of doing things right is very important. That's what you're saying. We have to recognize the quality of love, compassion, in order to develop love and compassion.
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay. So this was all rather dense and intellectual, and that's what His Holiness is presented here, and we're trying to digest it. And so do consider it, do think about these things, and do think about the development of this heedfulness, mindfulness, and awareness as techniques for harnessing our self-cherishing, our selfish tendencies, in order that we can more skillfully develop a concern for others. That will be our homework, all of us. Okay, I think we should stop here. So, we shall read the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Gurus. And here what we are recollecting are the qualities of the Buddha, the Dharma, the doctrine, and the Sangha, the spiritual community. And this recollecting is in itself a virtuous quality. It develops some kind of virtue in us, and when we pray for others, often this is recited when someone has died. Saying this prayer for others is meant to be of benefit to them as they go from this life to the next.
You know, Laura Poker.
Karen, are there people? Laura Poker.
According to the Queen of Death.
So, I prostrate to the Omniscient One. Thus
Thus
the
the
Lord
Lord
Bhagavad
Tathagata Arahat Sammasambuddha, the learned, the virtuous one, the Sravaka, the knower of the world, the charioteer and tamer of beings, the unsurpassable one, the teacher of the others and the luminous in Buddha Bhagavad, the Tathagata is the Lord of all merit. He is the highest of the structure. He is the complete ornament of all nations. He raises the treasures of merit. He is born by ignorance. He blossoms with flowers of ignorance. His activity is kind and inappropriate. Seeing him, he is without harmony. He brings true joy to those who only faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strength cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all sentient beings. He is the heart of the Bodhisattvas. He is the king of the noble ones. He is the guide of those who enter the city of Brahmana. He possesses immeasurable wisdom. He possesses inconceivable confidence. His speech is completely pure. His morality is pleasing. One that cannot deceive him. His form is incomparable. He is not slain by the fire. He is not slain by the completely away from gases. These are not subject of tattoos. Sayatana self-control, he is completely autonomous. He is completely liberated from restraint or harm. He is liberated from grabbing. He is the source of the river. He is liberated from all resistance. He abides in the wisdom of the Buddha Bhagavad, who are like the past, present, and future. He is not like the Brahma. He abides in the ultimate perfection. He dwells in the universe, he sees all sentient beings. All these are the virtues of the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavad. The Holy Dhamma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Its meaning is excellent, its word is excellent, it is uncorrupted, it is completely perfect and completely pure. It is completely purifies. The Bhagavad teaches the Dhamma well. It brings complete vision. It is free from sickness. It is always kind. It is direct from further, seeing it fulfills one's purpose. It brings to the remaining side of our hearts. The Dhamma which is taught by the Bhagavad It is renunciation. It causes one to arrive perfect enlightenment. It is without contradiction. It is safety. It is trustworthy. It is accurate. As the Sangha of great Jnana, they enter completely. They intensify glory. They incite glory. They enter harmoniously. They are worthy of adoration to draw harm. They are worthy of receiving frustration. They are free of the world's merriment. They are completely capable of receiving all gifts. They are object of generosity. They are great object of complete generosity. The protector of possesses kindness. The omniscient teacher. The case of the merit and virtue. Attached to the Tathagata. Feel the cause of freedom from passion. Greatly liberated from Brahma. The seal of the supreme ultimate truth. Attached to the Dharma which he sees. Having liberated the short heart of realization. They are wholly dedicated to the supreme. They are wholly healed as virtue. Attached to the Sangha. Attached to the Buddha, the leader. Attached to the Dharma, the protector. Attached to the Sangha, the humanity. Attached respectfully and always speaks free. The Buddha spiritual is example. The Dharma spiritual is example. The Sangha spiritual is example. Having faith in these examples. Therefore, the solutions are example. May they be born and complete to our life.
Verses becoming aligned with the determination
To accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings.
Who possess the devotion of the jewel, I will learn to hold them to be clear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to be myself and always small. I respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to reach with my mind, and as soon as the emotional crisis, engage myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish community beings, and those obsessed by strong disease and sufferings. And at the Dhamma precious church of beautiful one, who comes out justly to be married, with the years enter so on. I will learn to kill all and always return to them. When my mind is in the very hope, and with the person very badly. I will learn to use exercise as a spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to always everyone without exception. All health and happiness directly and indirectly. I respectfully deny myself all harm and suffering of the masses. I will learn to forgive all these risks, and because of my sins, free will concerns. And by understanding all phenomena as by illusions, and be released from harm to abstraction.
prayer for the spiritual exalted wisdom of all victors gathered in a drop,
so are the vision and the best of all wonder and suffering of Guru Vasam Devan. Please prevail in this city every day of their hour fulfilled. We beseech the great God of doctrine, accomplish you from all without last days of aspirational prayers, word of speech of the teachings, spreading them and extend by means of education practice. Thou holding the commitment, I will invite all beings to be my guest and most success the great awakening. Yet you have performed the activities of former bodies that serve the welfare of others. Is that worthy of the supreme among beings of Bodhisattvas? Though impossible for the idealistic with existence and to abandon your commitment to liberate all beings, we beseech the new son of Nirmanakaya to swiftly return from Brahmanakaya, brought forth by Bodhisattva drawn by seven steeds, and reach the far limits of scholarship, religious life, and goodness. Please come swiftly as the unrivaled supreme emanation, full holder of the sage's teaching, and worshipful you, returns the glory of most Feb, manifest the truth of the religious symbols, may you spontaneously fulfill our wish, the swift possible reincarnation fresh from my face.
On Wednesday in South Arlington University.
I promise you.
Are we off? I turned the light down. If you push the button.
Oh, yeah, okay, thanks.
You follow her.
Yeah.